Can everyone hear me?
I can. Get everybody out in the audience.
Can everyone hear me?
If anybody can't, just wave their hand and we'll turn it up a notch.
So Will and Ryan are passing out the presentation. Going to work through the presentation. Again, I appreciate everyone's patience. We would normally be in the larger room and probably have a different setup, but because we have the one screen here set up this way, everyone has opportunity to see the screen. So at this point, I'll get started if the board is ready.
Yes, ma'am. We're ready.
Okay,
All members? All right.
And did
Let's
the Board
go.
of Education convene their meeting?
Yes, if they need to do so. Board of Education, do you need to convene your meeting and bring it to order?
This is a collaborative meeting. Yeah, we're in the audience, so we weren't sure.
Not clear.
Okay.
Where's our attorney?
Here I am.
Do I need to call this to order since we're not really pending?
I mean, did y'all notice the meeting? It is.
They did, yeah.
I did not know. The meeting was to do a joint meeting, but the meeting agenda doesn't reflect that, nor does this the way that this is set up.
I mean, I guess you.
Expected it to be a meeting. You thought it was a joint?
I also have a presentation.
Call this joint budget work session of the county commissioners and of our school board.
Oh, well, that could be more productive. I hate that they're sitting there.
The official.
Really? I didn't know they were.
All right. Board of Commissioners is on board, Board of Education is here and have called their meeting to order. So at this point, we'll begin the presentation. Coy, judges hit enter here. All right. Again, welcome everyone. I'll go ahead and get started. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to inform the Board of Commissioners and taxpayers, to gather some information and to receive direction on the next steps for funding education. My next slide is important points about Franklin County education funding. I'm going to walk through some things here and share some information. First of all, the Board of Education fiscal year 25 local expense increase is 20.5% or $5,213,620 over the fiscal year 24 local expense funding total funding amount of $25,328,192 for a total request of $30,541,812 for fiscal year 25. Last year's requested local expense increase was a 15.6% increase and was funded. Want to make sure everyone understands that funding for Franklin County Public Schools represents 23.56% of the total general fund budget for Franklin County. In addition, $5.8 million is the annual debt service for Franklin County Schools facilities. Franklin County also understands that a portion of the public school funds directly support the charter schools that now educate approximately 28% of the school-age children in Franklin County. For fiscal year '24, that amount was $6,692,800, and the requested amount for fiscal year '25 is $8,542,509. So for every dollar requested by Franklin County Schools for local expense funding, 28 cents goes to the charter school total. I do want to make a few comments before I move on to the next slide. I want to point out that there is much more transparency and information about education funding in our state, because education has been an evolving topic for a number of years. Changes in education processes have been made, and more are being discussed. There are a number of websites that have regular articles about education issues and education funding. The changes in education processes are being discussed and decided in the state legislature. And county governments and school districts are tasked with implementing and following the statutes that are handed down to our entities. Both of our entities are faced with the similar challenge of how to efficiently use available resources. And so I'm going to continue on with some other important points. The Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education have agreed to form a capital committee to review the capital needs for school facilities. A $100 million request, definite needs in that area. The issue of school funding is a critical issue for the taxpayers of Franklin County. The goal of the Board of Commissioners, working with the Board of Education to understand the details for the annual funding request, is to ensure that taxpayer funds are spent wisely and result in the intended outcomes. Of course, delivering a quality education to students across Franklin County supports the economic development objectives and needs of our growing county. The next slide, I won't read in its entirety, but just to point out, the Local Government and Fiscal Control Act assigns the budget officer responsibility to the county manager, a very important and nerve-wracking role at times, trying to make sure that we gather all of the information and can appropriately recommend to the Board of Commissioners a budget. And of course, the next page, next slide talks about and points out the manager presents the budget, but the Board of Commissioners ultimately set the fiscal policy and pass a balanced budget. Again, manager prepares and submits the budget, and the Board of Commissioners has and shall exercise the responsibility of developing and directing the fiscal policy of county government under the provisions and procedures of the Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. So everyone has a role in this process, and I think information is what results in the success of things moving along smoothly. The next slide. I want to talk for just a minute about gathering information. Of course, gathering information is essential to successful budgeting. On March 8th of 2024, the county submitted the fiscal year 25 education budget questions. The county finance director sent the questions to the Franklin County Schools finance director. That's been our communication process that we've used for budget questions. And this year, the questions were submitted back on March the 22nd in advance of the budget presentation. And I think everyone's familiar with the questions. Then, on April 15th, the Franklin County Schools budget was approved by the Board of Education and forwarded to Franklin County on April the 16th. And then, of course, included in that presentation on April the 15th was the Franklin County Schools budget message presented by the superintendent. And, of course, this slide is an excerpt, the first page of the budget message. And then I think this is page 7, which is a summary of the request, the items that make up the total request from the Franklin County Board of Education to fund schools. The next slide represents Franklin County Schools responded to the fiscal year 25 education budget questions on April 18th and 19th of 2024. Quinley did an excellent job of putting together some information, sent us some electronic documents, as well as printed copies of information that was delivered to the administration building, and I believe maybe even to the finance office to make sure we had the information. On April 24th, Franklin County sent a request for some additional information and clarifications. As we looked through the information, there were questions that just needed more complete information. We needed a bit more information to have what we needed to move forward with completing our review and being prepared to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. After sending the request, we received a response from the superintendent. And in the response from the superintendent, she says, "We have offered a great deal of detail to you already, and the scope of what we are provided far exceeds what other districts we have communicated with provide to their counties in the budget development process. As we have indicated, we are more than willing to schedule a meeting to sit down and discuss our budget details with you. We won't be providing anything additionally prior to a face-to-face meeting." So that's why we're here today, to discuss the questions and the next steps and the information that's needed. Certainly understand where we're at. And so at this time, I would like to call on our county attorney, Gina McCray. She's going to come forward and talk about the laws that govern education funding.
So just to be clear, I'm going to be advising the Board of Commissioners, since I'm your attorney, on this board's responsibility as it relates to education funding. So the county, I just want to take a big step back to, and I'm sure you were all aware of this, responsibility as a county is as it relates to education funding. The county has the power and the responsibility to tax citizens to fund schools. Now, am I supposed to be doing this? There we go. Did not realize that. So, and this goes all the way back to the Constitution of North Carolina that says that that we have a responsibility to provide free public schools. And then there is the authority then that's granted to the county to collect taxes in order to fund education. And then there's a lot of various statutes under 115C that talks about, that gives the county the power to appropriate funds in order to fund education. The county commissioners are the ones that finally decide the amount of tax to collect. And I've provided the statutes for you in case you wanted to look them up for yourself. But the commissioners shall determine the amount of county revenue to be appropriated in the county budget ordinance to the local school administrative unit. So this is a responsibility that you as commissioners have, and it's an important responsibility that you have. And it's a very powerful power that you have to collect funds from Franklin County taxpayers. And one of the responsibilities that you have is to fund public school education. Of that entire budget, but the one that I wanted to focus on, or thought you should hear a little more about, is the local current expense. This local current expense, which is their operating costs, there's a combination of sources to fund this local current expense. And Franklin County, the counties, share in part of that responsibility for operations. And so that if you One of the reasons that we wanted to highlight to the county commissioners is to let you know that the funding request that the school has asked for local expense is above the default local expense rate. And you can find that rate in 115C-431. As a part of your responsibility, you have the ability to ask for information to help you understand how much money you should be asking Franklin County taxpayers for in order to fund education. So for you to be informed as a board on how much money to collect from our citizens, then you can request information from the schools to get that information. It's to help you make a better decision for that. And this is just, the legislature has set this up so that there can be a give and take in relationships between the Board of Education and the Board of County Commissioners, so that we can make a collective wise decision on how much money to collect and how much from our taxpayers, and then how much to give to the schools. And this is more important in the circumstance where the request for the local expense funding exceeds that default rate. And as I understand, and I think you're going to hear more about, that there is probably going to be the need to raise taxes in order to meet that funding request, and that's something that this board will need to consider, is whether or not you're going to raise taxes in order to meet that funding request. So that's all.
All right, thank you, Gina. All right, so next slide, I want to talk for just a few minutes about why is this information being requested and why is it needed. As I've said earlier, this is about information. This is about information that's needed to make decisions. This is about making sure that we are appropriately presenting information and recommending information that is acceptable to our taxpayers. And so the issue of school funding is a critical issue for the taxpayers of Franklin County, because this impacts the amount of taxes they will pay to live in Franklin County. That's no surprising statement. Of course, the goal of the Board of Commissioners, working with the Board of Education to understand the details for the annual funding request, is to ensure that an appropriate amount of taxes is collected and that taxpayer funds are spent wisely and result in the intended outcomes. Being very transparent about that information, being very transparent about that goal. We are asked questions at the county manager's office, in the finance department. Commissioners are asked these kinds of questions all the time. And so very important that we talk about that. Funding for Franklin County Public Schools represents 23.56% of the total general fund budget for Franklin County. In addition, $5.8 million is spent on debt service for Franklin County Schools facilities. We have a number of outstanding loans on school buildings. And so the $5.8 million, of course, that decreases every year as we pay that loan off, but it's been steadily decreasing, but we've got yet a few years to go to get out from under that level of debt. And we have an opportunity to come together and discuss the next generation of school buildings for Franklin County. The $100 million that's requested, the opportunity to update some buildings and work through a process so that students continue to be excited about coming into the facilities and being a part of Franklin County schools. And so that's really very, very important, and that's the next bullet on here. Addressing the capital request from the school system will require careful financial planning. And I want to digress just a little bit from that for just a second to talk about Again, several years ago, the county began adopting a capital improvement plan every year. The county has a number of needs. We have a number of projects that are ongoing. And so trying to make sure that we prioritize those projects correctly, and then bringing in the layer of needs that the school system has is very, very important. It's very, very important because the economic success of Franklin County is, of course, a part of the cooperation that goes on in the county and the educational systems that are offered for our residents and for folks who potentially want to invest in Franklin County. I talk about this as county manager. My economic development director talks about this very frequently, and lauds the great things that we have going on in education in Franklin County. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep going. And so we're at a point where there's a little bit of a decision, and that's why we want to share this information very openly, very straightforward, make sure that the commissioners, the Board of Education, the public understands what's ahead for us. So the Board of Commissioners has supported achieving a revenue-neutral tax rate recommendation from the tax revaluation process that's underway. That's a big statement. That's something that's been talked about from the very beginning of the tax reval process, that the goal is to support and achieve a revenue-neutral tax rate. Achieving a revenue-neutral tax rate and maintaining the needed funding for county operations will not be possible if the Board of Education request is funded above the default local expense rate. And Gina's explained, our county attorney's explained the default local expense rate. I think the Board of Education is probably familiar with that calculation as well.
Can you help me? I'm not familiar with it. I wish somebody would explain.
Yeah, if I can get through a few more points, we'll get the county attorney to talk about it. Yes. And so the fiscal year 25 Franklin County Schools request is over $3.5 million above the default local expense rate. And so the Board of Commissioners will be faced with the needing to raise taxes above the revenue-neutral tax rate to fund the request. And so again, that's why the information is needed. That is the landscape that we're faced with. So at this point, I want to stop for just a minute. I know Mr. Piper's asked a question, and it's a very good question. But I want to stop because the next step that we were potentially, or that we are prepared to talk about, and we've already discussed this in my original timeline where we had the list of questions and the information, was the opportunity to go through the questions, to actually talk through, maybe one by one, the questions, the budget questions that were presented to the Board of Education, and the responses we received, and the information that's needed. So, Chairman Foy, I'm going to stop at this point and see if you want to entertain a conversation with the Board of Education on whether we should continue by going through the questions or where we would like to go from here.
Okay, let's take a break for just a second and see what the Board of Education would like to
I
do.
would like Dr. Schuler to be able to give her response. She has a prepared response.
If that were, if that's okay.
Okay? You good?
All right. Good evening, Chairman Foy, members of the Board of Commissioners, school board members, and those in the audience. Thank you for your time this evening. I do have something that I wanted to hand out, and I'm going to do that really quickly. You know, we wanted to have a meeting, a collaborative meeting. I think it's really important that we do that. I also think that it's really important at this point that we just be really direct and honest with each other about where we are with funding. I think Ms. Denton has made some points along those lines. But as I prepared for tonight's meeting, this is the work that took place last spring, the communication and presentations and back and forth. And as I thought about today, and this is where we are this year with that, We're really in a position where I think that it's important that we work to make sure that we're spending time on the right things and we're having conversations about the right things around budget. And so I have a few points that I want to go through, and they're just very direct, bottom line, but I feel like it's important to do that. So I've shared that with you, and if you want board members, if you want one as well. Actually, yeah, okay. First of all, our board, I think does somebody have my notes page? I think I made a few notes. I think I handed one with my notes on it. Do you have one with scribble on it? You don't? Okay, all right, well then I didn't. It's okay. Thank you, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Piper. All right, so first of all, our Board of Education has unanimously approved a thorough and a thoughtful local budget request to Franklin County. Our board unanimously approved it. It included budget details with a lot of depth. We've covered expenses for 5 years, historical impacts of longevity bonuses. We've covered short-term facility needs, charter school enrollment numbers, ADM statistics, ESSER funding impacts, and more. We have gone above and beyond, and I did mention that in the email that I sent Ms. Denton, that we've gone above and beyond what most of our neighbors have shared in terms of their budget request. Ms. Coley is here. She has her little cart that she wheeled in over beside of her seat, and she could, if she needs to take time to go through all of the documents that we provided, either in paper or electronically to you all, she's happy to do that. With that, and I showed you my notebooks as well, I believe that you have more than enough information to make an informed decision. And that's not saying that we're not willing to give additional information. We provided you with ample information, and the frustration comes when we're being asked for specific invoices and contracts when we provided significant amounts of information. We have, just like you all have processes, you have policies in place and procedures, we have processes in place. We have board policies that govern everything that we do. We have auditors that review our books. We have checks and balances in place to ensure that we are operating within our adopted board policies. We can give more, but my concern is that, and we're more than willing to answer questions, which is what Ms. Denton read in that response, was before we send anything additionally, we need to sit down and have a conversation, which is what we've been asking for, is that face-to-face conversation, which I hope we can have. I don't know how conducive this will be tonight, but I hope that we can have some of that conversation. My concern is that we have, you see these, this is time that our staff is spending answering questions when we are in the culminating part of the school year where 8,000 students are engaged in teaching and learning, and that's our responsibility as well. So with that in mind, and along the same lines, for the past 2 years, we have provided extensive information to the county. We have gone back, we've met multiple times, we've gone back and answered questions on numerous occasions, provided reports. We have had no indication that that data that we used has been part of the decision-making in our funding request. Prior year funded at a much lower level than what was needed, and we ended up having to dip into fund balance significantly to offset that deficit. And last year, after all of the meetings, all of the work, we come to the county manager's budget presentation only to learn that of the $3.4 million that we had laid out very thoughtfully and thoroughly as our need, that it was being recommended that we receive $700,000 towards that, with no clear explanation as to where that number came from. So that's one of the concerns about spending time pulling together documentation when we are not seeing that that is used at the decision-making process. The next point, our local funding request reflects what is needed to maintain operations next year, no more, no less. We are not padding our budget or creating a situation where we're inflating our request so that we can settle like as a negotiation, I don't think that's honest. I don't think that's the way that we should proceed with taxpayers' dollars. So we've been very clear about what our request is and the need for that. And the bottom line is that the overwhelming majority of our local request for Franklin County Schools is the $2.5 million for the longevity bonus. There are a couple of other items there. We do have inflationary increases. For instance, utilities costs are supposed to go up over $400,000 next year alone. We have worked to tighten our belts in spite of inflationary impacts, and we have reduced our spending by $431,000 to offset our request. Franklin County Schools is requesting $3.36 million, but as Ms. Denton pointed out, 28% of our local funds go to charter schools. So that means if Franklin County Schools receives that $3.36 million, then the charter school funding increased request will be need to be $1.8 million for a total of $5.2 million. So we're not asking for $5.2 million for Franklin County Schools. We're asking for that for a combination of Franklin County Schools and charter students. The next point, in spite of continued inflationary increases, we've been committed to being good stewards of taxpayers' dollars. We have offset our request by reducing the expenses I mentioned. We've also absorbed 3 office positions at the central office in the past year to find savings. We've also prioritized maintaining positions funded by that COVID relief ESSER funds that have a direct impact on student achievement, like including our elementary interventionists and middle school coaches, without requesting additional funding. And we've shifted our media coordinator positions with those funds into state funds, into classroom teacher positions to allow us to maintain the interventionists and instructional coaches without asking for an increase to maintain those important initiatives, which saves $1.5 million more off of a local request. The next point, longevity bonus is not news. We have been communicating to the county on that early and often. For the past 3 years, that has been something that has been communicated to the county on multiple occasions, including State of the Districts and budget messaging and our budget presentations. We have not asked the county for additional funds to support an increased teacher supplement since 2017-18. We've instead said we're going to use our ESSER funds to help offset those impacts on the local budget to incentivize our staff to maintain employment with Franklin County Schools. With that, over 1,000 of our employees are eligible to receive that longevity bonus for the 24-25 school year. And just as a side note, at least 637 of those are county residents and taxpayers in Franklin County that receive that financial incentive. We must have these funds in place to remain competitive in all areas of employment. That is bus drivers, cafeteria, maintenance, instructional assistants, teachers. All of our positions benefit from that longevity bonus, and we surveyed our employees. Over 70% of them stated that the longevity bonus impacts their decision to remain with Franklin County Schools. And I said I would be direct, and I am. If these bonuses are not funded by the county, our employees they're going to perceive that as a loss of pay. They've received that for 3 years now, resulting from county leadership electing not to pay that longevity bonus. Charter schools, we talked about that already. In Franklin County, they receive 28% of local funding, and that's based on state law. The county's continuing to grow, and we're seeing enrollment increases in traditional public and charter schools. One thing, in looking at the county's page on the education funding, it's lengthy, it's thorough, but it doesn't Franklin County Schools, when in reality we have 11,000 combined students between public schools and charter schools in Franklin County. So the school-age population that Franklin County is financially responsible for continues to grow. That's increased by 12%. despite questions about our ADM numbers, and I think this is really impressive, and I think kudos to Ms. Coley and her team for being able to do this, but considering all the variables, last spring when we met with you all, you're like, well, how do you know about what the enrollment's going to be? How are you projecting that? We projected last spring, for budgeting purposes, a combined enrollment between us and charters of 10,780 students, and we actually enrolled 10,794. So with all of those variables, we were 14 students over our original projection in enrollment, which is over 99% accuracy. The county leadership must provide per pupil funding at the same level. We've talked about that before. Our facilities are a priority, and we must receive funds to address these needs short-term while working on a long-range funding plan. We have $2.6 million that we've identified in short-term needs, and that addresses HVAC, roofing, lighting, carpeting, technology. Schools, we have a process in place for review of those and prioritization of those requests. Schools came forward with $11 million in identified needs, and we've culled that down to $2.6 million. Our request for capital outlay is lower than the $3 million we requested last year, for which we received half, or $1.5 million. And we really would love to know more about debt service. We truly do want to know as we can about debt service and how that works. The next bullet, the county is in a solid financial situation, and our school community knows it. We were fortunate enough to be here in February for the State of the District will be presented. So we had our principals and our central office leadership and a number of our school employees, and they were very encouraged to see the positive numbers for the county in terms of increases in revenues. You could read these. I'm not going to read all of this, but 2 points I'd like to make. Overall numbers on the rise. 2 numbers I'd like to mention. Because can see a comparison here with us. The county appropriated this past year in fiscal year 2023, $11 million to balance the budget. So that funding was appropriated in case it was needed over the course of the year to balance the budget. And we do that same thing in our schools. And the county didn't spend a penny of that. It was all put back in fund balance or into savings. And the years prior, for the several years prior, it wasn't quite $11 million, but it was the same thing. So that money is allocated, knowing that the county may have to spend it, and you were fortunate that you didn't have to spend any of that, and you were able to put it back into your savings account. By comparison, this year we have appropriated $600,000 for that purpose, and our goal is to spend half of that, or around $300,000. Last year, since we only received $689,000 to support the new charter school, we actually had to use $2.3 million of our fund balance to offset that funding not being there. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is around the county's financial situation is we received informal notice that there is a potential $845,000 plus decrease in low wealth funding for next year. Those funds are being decreased based on the state's formula, which has determined that Franklin County has the ability to fund schools at a higher level due to increased local revenues. I will say I reached out to Representative Winslow and asked if there's any way we could get a waiver on that for the upcoming year that hit financially, and he but if we lose $845,000, we didn't ask for anything extra in this request. We'll be have to dip into fund balance to offset that request. Again, a vote to not fully fund our request is a vote to cut salaries or people. We don't have extra things in our budget. So this recommendation was unanimously approved by our Board of Education because they understand that if we don't get full funding of this request, we will either have to cut the longevity bonus that our over 1,000 employees have received for the past several years and are expecting, or we risk having to cut a potentially significant number of positions and people. Either option shortchanges our students. And then on the final expect Franklin County leadership to support the future success of our children. And here's your opportunity, because you have not moved forward with a recommendation yet. And I've heard discussion about tax rate, and I certainly wouldn't expect you all to understand all the details of our budget. It's complicated, and you're not in education, and I don't understand every aspect of your budget. But I will say, just looking at the numbers, if we're asking for a $5.2 million increase, you thought you might have to spend $11 million last year in fund balance, and you put every penny of it back. That would actually fund that difference for 2 years. So you have an opportunity to demonstrate that you value, and I believe you value, the children of Franklin County and the families of Franklin County. And I know, based on the decisions that you're making, you're working to move the county forward in a positive direction, and we are growing. It's essential that our education system reflect that commitment. And so with that being said, we are keeping our school community informed. I have already told them there will be a budget recommendation at the May 20th meeting. I'm asking on behalf of our board and our school community and do what is needed to make sure that our students are getting the very best opportunities, and that they have the very best adults working with them to make those opportunities come true for them. And with that being said, I'm asking that you fully fund that request, and that you demonstrate the commitment to the 1,000+ employees, over 600 of whom are residents in Franklin County, and the 8,000+ students we serve every day. And that's it from me.
Chairman Foy, may I go to the podium?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler, for those comments. I think one important thing that I need to clarify for tonight's meeting, for the benefit of the Board of Education, the note I received back from Dr. Schuler says, "We are prepared to provide an informal overview of our request and answer any questions that you may have regarding the information that we have provided. We will see you all Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. I apologize, we did not receive any kind of official notice back from the superintendent to indicate this would be a joint meeting. But again, we're trying to work with the space that we have, so making this visible is really important. But I want to make clear a few important points. First of all, I want to clarify that the county has put such a level of importance on this process, and recognize that it is complicated and has so many moving parts, that we've enlisted an expert in this area to help us understand this information. This is really, really critical. This is critical to the taxpayers of Franklin County, and it's critical, coming at a very, very critical time right now with all of the capital projects that the county has. Dr. Schuler indicated that the Board of Education has a thorough and thoughtful local budget request. I appreciate all the hard work that has gone into this budget request. We have a great respect for budgeting and what it takes to put the information together. Also, I will suggest that we continue on and go through our questions so that we can demonstrate that there is some additional information that's needed, and certainly, if not additional information, a better understanding of the information that we've received. A couple of other points that I want to make. In spite of the inflationary increases, I recognize that's an excellent point that the superintendent has made. The county is not immune to those inflationary increases as well. We have seen vehicles and supplies increase as much as 20%. And so that's why achieving the board's direction of a revenue-neutral tax rate has been a real challenge. And so trying to work together on figuring out how we can spend our dollars the wisest across the board is important. And I think that was one of my earlier points, that the dictates and the statutes and the effects of legislature, and it's being handed down again to county governments and school districts to figure out what to do. additional questions about that so that we can understand what that means. Also, the solid financial situation of the county, I do want to address that. Again, it is as the budget officer for the county, I've got the finance director here, the board of commissioners here, the assistant county managers here. We take that work very, very seriously. And just because a surplus amount came back in does not mean that there aren't already some projects in the works, that there aren't already some things on the table in our capital improvement plan that are planned to be used for some of those specific things. The other thing I must point out is the county budget grows every year because we are experiencing such growth in this county. And so that means by percentage, as our fund balance needs to be maintained at a certain percentage, because if we need to borrow money to fund schools, to fund facilities, to do those kinds of things, the fund balance amount is a very, very critical piece of how our financial advisors and the marketplace looks at what's going on in the county. So that is not just free money. That is being watched very carefully and is there for a purpose. We will talk about the low wealth funding. Because I believe there are some state statutes in place for that that help with that issue. So at this point, I'm going to call Assistant County Manager Ryan Preble to the podium. He's going to walk us through the questions and the information that's needed. I will say too, I believe the Board of Commissioners and the county staff certainly understands the respect and leadership that's needed to keep Franklin County moving forward, and recognizes how hardworking all of the citizens of Franklin County are, regardless of whether they work for the county or whether they work for the school system. So Ryan, if you would come forward. Yes.
Good? All right. Well, thank you and good evening. As we go through these questions, I'll do my best to explain what the county's after, and then the follow-up questions that we provided as we go through that, and explain that as best I can, and provide the email so you can see the communication back and forth to explain what we're trying to accomplish with the questions we're asking. So I'll get started. We'll get to the next one here. All right. So our first question is about the budget process. What we're going through and looking for is new information derived from this year's budget. In other words, a year we're currently in. So we look at the previous years to help to forecast what that budget will be. And so, as you'll see, we made a request to the schools to ask for that information. And so I'll read that, but that is what we're after here. And then the next slide will show exactly what we're after. So please update the fiscal year 24 preliminary projections to include current data and add in the fiscal year 25 projections comparison on tab 3, summary of Fund 2 data shared at Board of Commissioners meeting 5 on May 5th of 23. The department program tab does not help without names for the programs or some other additional context tying tab 1 to the by department tab 2. And so now you'll see that. So what we're looking at here is we need the update to the column on the left, so we have the current information as of May of this year, those transactions, if you will, for all of the line items, and what that difference is from the year previous. I hope that makes sense, and we'll move on. That was the first set.
So, are we actually answering them as we go, or what's the plan about?
You want to just go through them all, Chairman? What do you? What do you, what do you?
I don't think it's, no, I think it will. I think it makes sense answering it.
Okay.
I think so too. I think it would be much easier to answer one at a time.
Okay, as we go along. Okay. I'm prepared for that. Go ahead.
Okay. You guys, we get,
So I'm going to assume that everyone was able to see the details that were provided in this budget document that we dropped off with the county. And we also provided electronic documents as well. So included in this document, the response about the document that you're looking at does not provide the details that you need for the programs, to identify the programs. In the document and the electronic format document, we provided a document by comparison for 23-24 to 24-25, as well as a 5-year that we provided last year. The 23-24 information, it provides information by department. It provides information by detailed object code. Object code is whether we're buying software or whether we're buying instructional material for the classroom. It also does a comparison, categorical comparison, so that you wouldn't have to dig through and decipher what our chart of account structure, or decipher what that means. So all of this information is included. As far as not having a syllabus or a glossary of what those departments are, yes, there was in the very back of the document, there's a department code description. There's an object code description. And all of this was provided day 2 after we got approval from our Board of Education. And then you received a manual copy. And we asked for any questions that you had to clarify any of the information that we have provided. Our doors are open to meet to discuss that. Let's collaborate. We've heard the prior chairman, Schreiber, speak directly to his county manager as well as his county director, finance director, to say, we want you to work to understand this. I have seen more staff being added. I've seen the transparency website that's provided, that does provide a lot of good information. If you want our information in the exact same format that you provide your information, I've looked into ClearGov and it costs $60,000 to $80,000. We can increase our line item to increase software, but that's what the cost is if you want it in the exact format of the information that you provide. This is more precise. This gives you the details that you need. All you have to do is ask for clarified answers. If you have any questions, we can provide it in any format that you want. But once you receive it, if you don't tell us that you don't understand it, then we are not able to answer your questions. And that requires meeting between us before it becomes something like this. But we have the information and we have shared the information in various formats.
Thank you. All right, go on with your next.
so our next question relates to the $2.5 million request for bonuses or retention. The additional details are needed to explain the employee bonus request in the amount of $2.5 million. In the information provided by the Franklin County Schools Finance Director, the amount spent on longevity bonuses is identified as $2,392,633. On the Franklin County Schools website, there are approximately 82 open job postings. Approximately half of these posted open job positions are teachers dating back to August of '23. The amount presented and identified for bonuses has remained at $2.5 million for 3 years, despite those vacancies. Is the $2.5 million bonus classified as bonuses and not subject to retirement? Was a question we wanted to pose to you guys. And the Board of Education budget recommendation includes the elimination of one position in the Franklin County Schools. And the amount requested for longevity bonuses provided provide more details and adjust that amount to the number of current employees that will receive those bonuses. And I just want to point out, we posed these questions to the finance director, and if you'll look down in the highlighted section there, there's definitely some information we still need over the course of those years, and there's definitely additional information is needed. But that was one of the main questions, is that $2.5 million has sustained over those 3 years despite changes in employment status for many school employees. And I'll pause there.
So we have also provided our initial plan as well as our adjusted plans to the county manager's office and the director's office that details out the criteria for our eligible employees. We have also traced how many employees have sustained, how many have left, what the cost will be from 1 year to the next, and the $2.5 million is the honey spot that we've seen as the average cost to outfit these longevity bonuses over the past 3 years, including this year. So when you look at the $2.3 million, the FICA, now that amount that you're showing is $2.3 million times 7.65%, you'll see that in the FICA line item. That's in the budget details. So, on average, we have spent $2.5 million to outfit the longevity bonus over the course of 3 years, and we have tracked that data. The question about retirement, whether it's subject to retirement, before we even brought the final plan to our Board of Education, because we also have federal government and DPI that we have to answer to. We submitted our plan to the federal ESSER compliance team as well, and Dr. Hawthorne is here. He's part of that ESSER team. We work very well together to make sure that we're in compliance with spending. We also contacted DPI to make sure that the plan was bulletproof before we approached our Board of Education for approval. So that's why retirement is not included in the bonus.
So just
Did-
sorry.
Did that answer?
I think so. I did have one follow-up. So are you saying that the $2.5 million, is it safe to say is a conservative number you use based on what you're normally seeing? So you're at 2.3, we'll call it 2.4 million. That is just a conservative budget number you use, the $2.5 million, knowing that it might be slightly less.
Could be slightly less than last
Well,
year was a
true.
slight more. It was slightly more.
Fair enough. Okay, just want to clarify that. I'm going to get this microphone right in a second.
And our vacancy list, depending on when you look at it, it can fluctuate. We have hiring and resignation seasons just like, well, I don't know if y'all go through the same things, but our status of employment does not stay the same throughout. So depending on when you looked at it, it could be accurate.
Okay, our next question.
Okay.
I can get that.
I have
Yeah, Chairman, go ahead.
Commissioner Bragg here.
I just want to make a comment about the bonuses. I realize that the bonuses were given with COVID money. And we knew that COVID money was not going to last forever. We knew it was going to last for a short period of time. Our schools decided to fund, instead of doing one-time purchases with the COVID money, which a lot of schools did decide to do that, our schools decided to give it to the teachers, which I think is wonderful that they gave it to the teachers. But they did not have a plan on how to continue that COVID money unless it was just to come to the county commissioners and ask us to continue that
Yes,
COVID money.
we did. That was our plan, and we communicated that with you all beginning in 2021 multiple times. And the reason that we approached that way instead of buying materials is that we had to have buses run to get students to school, have students fed, have teachers in classrooms, have instructional support, all of those things, and we're competing with other counties for that. we have not come to the county for any increases for those employees, and we haven't touched the teacher supplement since 2017, 2018. We are in a position now that if we don't maintain this, we have the potential to not have buses taking children to school, not have children fed, not have teachers in classrooms. It is already a challenge to fill those positions. And other counties around us have increased supplements and have supplements that exceed ours. We are competing with limited resources to make sure that we keep folks employed in Franklin County who are going to make a positive difference for students. And that was a very strategic decision on our part to fund that for 3 years for ESSER, but we have been very communicative about that this is something that will need to be maintained long-term, so.
When COVID was here, did you lose funding during COVID?
We actually asked for less funding. There was the first year of COVID, you could look back, but that first year, our current expense request was almost nothing. We can pull that number, yep.
Okay, so, but we still had funds to pay the teachers who were still paid during COVID, right?
I'm not sure how to answer that I'm not sure what you're asking.
They never missed a paycheck, did they, during COVID?
No, but what does that have to do with the longevity bonus?
I'm just saying the longevity bonus was a bonus for the teachers during COVID, but they never missed their regular.
They didn't, but the point is that if they could go to Granville County and get a 10% supplement, or remain in Franklin County and get an 8% supplement, or go to Wake and get a 20% supplement, or go to Johnston, what's the supplement there, Chris? 14 to 16 to 17%. So
I totally understand that on the county side, because we face the same thing with our employees every day here, because we don't pay as much as the counties that surround us salaries to our employees. I totally understand that. And the issue that I have with doing the supplement, if we pay a supplement to the school system for their employees, then the county, and we have employees too, and we're going to have to pay that supplement to the county employees also. Our county employees are not going to be happy that we paid it to another group of employees. They're not going to be happy. Do you agree?
Without them getting it, no.
Yeah, without them getting it too. So that means that we probably, if we do it for one group, we're going to have to do it for the other.
Could I comment, Commissioner Brown?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, I'm gonna try to be brief. We are being, all of us, we're in conflict. We can pass out all the paper in the world, and I done got 3 rings over here.
I know, right? I do too.
And the bottom line is, you can succinctly bring all this to one little sheet of paper that Dr. Schuler produced, but it's fairly simple. We're asking for $5.2 million over last year's budget. $2.5 million of that is the longevity bonus for all employees. Certified, whether you're a custodian, been working in Franklin County 20 years or 2 years. Bus driver, often the people who are forgotten. The folks we've seen in Durham County not showing up, parking the buses and that type of thing. Fortunately, in Franklin County, we haven't had to do that. Supplements, we didn't start a supplement. We merged these 2 school districts. This is a historic year. This is the 30th year merger. This is 2024, I do believe. And we merged in 1994. And I'm going to tell you, I've never seen as much potential conflict between a board of commissioners and school board as back then, when that was fairly contentious. But when we merged, there was not a supplement in this county. Absolutely zero for teachers. And old Gene Allen, and Doug Moore and others, I think we started the first year about 98 with $500. And then it crept up to $750 for a few years. And then it finally got up into mid-90s to 1,500, and then it gradually got up to where it is today. Is it 8%, Dr. Schuler? Yes. It's 8%. But I understand, Roxanne, what you're talking about, your people. And I'm all for anybody getting what they got, and I understand you advocate for yours, but we got to advocate for our kids. But we're being inundated with these questions, and I'm going to be quite frank with you, like Dr. Schuler said. A lot of these questions, when I look at them, I made notes on them, but I'm going to go from the old head here, you've got enough detail. There's been enough time spent on paper. We're an elected Board of Education, every one of us over here, just like you an elected Board of Commissioners. I had to go out and stick out my signs and raise my little $1,000 and run to Gary Kennard and get me some cards. And you know, we are elected to operate the schools. But to ask us for receipts, contracts, invoices, Dr. Schuler used the word overreach. It's way overreach. If the county commissioners want to operate and you know, take our places, maybe start working with your legislature and let them replace it, and y'all take that on too. I mean, we are trying our best. All we're doing is advocating for children. And I'm going to tell you, this is my 35th budget. I worked 38 years with the school district and retired. But the last 22 was with Franklin County Schools, either as an assistant superintendent or executive director. And I've been to many presentations. We talk about debt service. The reason the debt service and the reason we had GO obligation bonds, 04, 30-some million, and 08, 51 million. And I can look in my reams of paper and show you, it's a deal of trust. It's like it's mistrust here. I can tell you, the County Board of Education has never, ever tried to hide things from the Board of Commissioners. We've always been up front with them. We've provided everything they ever asked for. But this year's the first year we have got into the weeds, as they say, the minutia, and dig down, and people asking for invoices and contracts. The bottom line is, the reason we need $5 million is on this one little sheet. We can stay all night and go through every one of these questions. This gentleman present his, and then Queen will do a response, and then some of us, like me and Ms. Bragg, interject. But the $2.5 million longevity bonus, we're asking for it. And we advocate for our staff, everybody. Now, only $42,608 instructional materials, $541,000 increased insurance utility rates. I can tell you, cost of utilities is going up. And when you got 17 school sites, 1.8 million square footage of facilities, it costs a lot for electricity. And as Ms. Denton says, a lot of our conflict here is being pushed on us by the North Carolina General Assembly. Because there was a time 30 plus years ago they paid for utilities, but they quit that. There used to be a time they paid longevity bonuses, but they quit that. They used to pay master's degrees, but they quit that. Teaching is a hard position to fill. Just today, Wake County Public Schools announced their Teacher of the Year. Do you know where it came from? You know who trained it, spent money on it? Franklin County Schools, about 8-10 years ago. Came to Franklin County, we hired him, trained him, invested in him. But Wake County, now named Teacher of the Year. We're asking $711,000, $711,000 for benefits. I mean, everybody knows the cost of benefits is rising. We've cut some positions. We cut media coordinators, and I'm going to tell you, that was as painful thing as this Board of Education has ever done, was to have to reassign media coordinators. But we did all that trying to improve the school situation overall. And then charter schools, I'm telling you, people need to understand. You cannot, all of you sitting around here, you are funding two school systems. You are, I'm going to say that again, you are funding two school systems. And that is the reason these requests are so big, because why is it big? Franklin County is growing. It's just like the state legislature. Some of them jump up and down and say, we're spending more money on education than we ever did. Well, you know why? The North Carolina population is growing like crazy. We take in 8,000 from New York each year. We take in 8,500 from California. Everybody has found out what Mark Speed and David Byrne and I all know. Franklin County is a great place. And Harry Ford knows it too, 'cause he's been here as long as we have. But that's it. That's all the increases. And we can sit here all night and argue about, well, I don't have enough information for this. And I don't have that. And you can ask that. And Queenie can ask that. But the reality of it is, it's on that one little page. And historically, if you look at it, we have been good stewards. I just want to quickly go back to the 08 bond and 04. We came in on every project under budget. The $51 million bond referendum, we came in 11 or 12 million under. And then we turned around and spent that on Turtle Lane, revamping that school, built a stadium at Lewisburg, and the debt service that's talked about a lot. It was a combined effort of the Franklin County Commissioners, leadership, and Board of Education walking hand in hand, getting voter approval. And what did they do? They voted for a tax increase. That's what they were doing. Now, I don't know if the taxes have ever been raised because of that. I don't think it has. I think we've been able to cover it with existing structure. So we had 2 successful bond referendums, and I don't think we ever had to raise taxes. But I'm going to close by saying all we're doing is trying to maintain our existence in a struggling environment and to provide the very best opportunity for our kids. And again, this is my 35th budget. I've never seen so much information presented, so much information sent back, so much sent forth, and now here we are. I feel like I'm on CNN and Fox watching something that I don't even want to talk about, because people, we can do better than this. And there's enough information. I will debate with anybody in this room on the county side from now until midnight, and if we want to take a break, we'll start back tomorrow, that you don't have enough information. Enough information is not the problem. The problem is how to fund it. And you're saying you got to have a tax increase. I hope you don't. Last year, what was said? We got to have a tax increase. Extra funding came, no tax increase. One person has said tonight, probably a tax increase. One person has said tax increase. So I don't know that, because that's your business. As your attorney said, she succinctly said, that's y'all's deal. That's not ours. Ours is to communicate the needs for these kids. And I'm going to tell you, as long as I'm a member and my colleagues back there, and I'm going to tell you, my colleagues back there and Dr. Schul and all them people, every day, all they're doing is advocating for the children of our school district. That's all it is. There's no hidden agenda. Dr. Schul's not going to end up next week running for office or something. And you know, we got Dr. Keithway. She's back there. I hate to say it, she got more years than I do. But my point is, all these nitpicking, conflicting questions going back and forth is totally unnecessary, Mr. Ford. Y'all got more than enough information. You just got to decide how much we can do and how much we can't do. And then we all just have to bear with it. And thank you for your time, and I promise I'll try to stay seated, but knowing me, if something strikes me, I might be back.
Commissioner Bragg.
I just want to say that I worked for the county for 27 years. I retired with 30 years because I was with the state before that. And I've done many county budgets. We had in the county to show every receipt and everything in the departments, everything that we had to turn it in that we spent. Because the commissioners, which I happen to be blessed to be one of the commissioners now, and I do enjoy it, were responsible for every penny that came in that was taxpayer money. That's why we had to do the detailed county budget. That's why we had to turn in every single penny of every receipt and everything to be accountable to the taxpayers of this county and the money that they give. That's why we're asking for the school to give us the same thing.
Well, but you know what, a distinction.
I hear you laugh, but I'm gonna tell you, there's a big difference, Ms. Bragg. You were a county agency, and you were directly responsible to the county leadership and manager. We are, and I'm gonna repeat this again, we are the elected board of Franklin County Schools. And all them people, and all them people with those receipts, they are submitting them, and we're the ones auditing them, and along with our auditors. So don't nobody sitting around here think that Franklin County folks don't keep up with invoices and contracts. We question it. We have quarterly contracts sent to us. We monitor that stuff to no end. But there's a difference when you're sitting in your position in your department and you work for the county. Yes, you got to do that. But when Queenie and all of our other folks do it, they're submitting it to our superintendent and to us, and we dig through it. So accountability is as strong as it can be on this Board of Education side. But we are an elected board, and we don't want the commissioners trying to micromanage and do our business. If so, then what's the use for us?
We're not trying to micromanage.
Okay, let's just hold it. Looking to the board here, I feel that we need to go ahead, not continue on with this as we're going. Get it back to the staff level, see what they can work out. Do your best, school board, school people. We'll get our staff to do the best they can, to look at these questions, do the best you can. That's all we can do. I don't want to drag this out anymore. I don't think we're going nowhere. We need to get together and just do the best we can.
Chairman Foy, if I can just speak on an example of the information that has been requested. We were asked to submit invoices, rosters from our charter schools, as if the detailed document that we have shared about the almost 30-plus charter schools that submit that information to us, as well as DPI, as if there was inaccuracies in our projections or questions about that. So my question becomes, if we gave you each individual invoice for each monthly reporting period, how would that assist you with finalizing your decision about whether you should fund charter schools and Franklin County schools? Because we can provide you that information, but we're trying to understand why there's so much distrust in the information that we're providing to you, because we've worked really hard with our charter schools to try to make sure that their numbers are provided when we submit our ask. Dr. Schuler has also stated how closely we were with our projections. So at the point that we're starting to give information to the county for them to start making our projections for us, which we've done a pretty good job at doing that, I have some concern about why you're asking for the information. Now, we can send it. We can. But again, it's wasteful time.
I'm trying to answer. I mean, I do the same way in my own businesses and stuff. Now, I don't mean going clear off the deep end now and going overboard, but there's a fine line between the two. And the more we can, get out in the open and discuss and question, answer, the good. But now, I agree, there can come a time when you're going too far with things, and you got to know the difference between the two. And that's what we're looking at. I don't see any, I don't want to keep on doing this excruciating budget workshop like we're doing right now. I don't think we're doing just the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish. Is any other board member here, any kind of comments they'd like to?
I've got a couple of questions, one for Tommy Piper. Tommy, you mentioned the state bragging about spending more on education. Does that include the $500 million that was just approved for private school vouchers? Yeah.
I'm not clear on the question, except, I mean, the legislature has made the additional opportunity scholarship funding a priority this short session, and they're looking at an allocation that I think all in will exceed $600 million next year in opportunity scholarships, which are in essence private school vouchers.
Yeah, and my reason for asking that, I must point out that that money is going to schools that are not accountable to any taxpayer whatsoever. They don't have to show what they're doing, not one nickel. My next question, it could be either our county manager or finance director. I don't know if you've already come up with a figure or not on this school funding, but how much out of this 5.2 million are you thinking we can fund? Just so we've got a number to work with. Or has that even been thought of?
Clear. In my earlier notes, I indicated in important notes that the default
Can you?
Does the default
Yeah, hold on a second, hold on a second. So, yes, answer the question. And then turn. She's going to explain a little bit further on.
Okay, the default local expense rate, again, in North Carolina General Statute 115C431, there's a process for the default local expense rate. And so the Franklin County Schools request is over $3.5 million, just slightly over $3.5 million above that default local expense rate. So there's a statutory rate that's set for funding. And so that's what this is about.
Does that include the lack of funding in the formula for the last few years that we haven't gotten? If we can't go up so much, I mean, there's been times that we've requested and hadn't received that.
I think that's a question we'd have to look more at the actual details of how it's calculated to understand that. So
Okay, and I just-
can't answer that immediately.
Okay, that'll be fine. I just had one quick question. I think your finance person can probably answer this. On the $6 million that's been spent on debt, does that come out of lottery funds? Is that where that money came from?
Lottery funds is only $400,000 going into our budget to help offset some of that $5.8 million, yes.
Can you request more to offset debt?
We can only use the lottery fund for certain things, and we also have to be mindful of the rest of our budget, of how we're gonna do that.
Okay, but my understanding,
Lottery funds-
yeah, my understanding is lottery funds can be used to pay debt. Okay, that's all I want to know.
We also use our restricted sales tax that is restricted for school use to pay offset the debt. That is part of what we're using, so we have to be very mindful about these two funding sources. They're very restricted.
So one thing I would like to say is that if we're talking about this is the rate that we can operate at, my first comment is then why am I why are we spending time here tonight going through these questions and doing this if you have a number already established? And one of the concerns we've had for the past 2 years is that we've done extensive work, provided extensive information, which has increased each year, gotten into the specifics, only to learn at the unveiling of the county manager's budget meeting that the recommendation it doesn't seem to be based on anything specific, any specific rationale that we're given. And I guess my question is, and it's sort of along the lines of what Quinley asked, is, if we are saying we cannot take a penny less than this, or we're cutting the longevity bonus, or we're eliminating jobs for our employees, which means our students will be shortchanged. So what is it going to take to help you all get to the point where that budget can be fully funded? Because I would imagine that the rate that you're talking about, if we did some comparatives, our neighbors have higher supplements than we do for employees. What we're trying to do is make sure that our employees continue to remain employed with us so we can run our buses, feed our kids, and make sure that we have teachers in classrooms. So, I'm concerned. I feel like we're not trusted. And that word trust has been mentioned multiple times, but the back and forth, and if this goes back to staff and then we end up spending weeks and lots of frustration with back and forth emails where we're answering questions, seems like a very unproductive way for us to operate at this point when you've been given a wealth of information. And it's not that we're not willing to provide information, but every report that we provide is time that our staff is spending away from the other important work that needs to take place to have a positive end to our school year. And that's where we are.
Right, thank you. I want to recognize Commissioner Bun.
Yes, sir, thank you. I got a couple of comments thus far. Mr. Piper is a great advocate for your schools. He is motivated. He is great. He mentioned a lot of things. We all know Franklin County is a great place to be. I don't think there's a person in this room who wants to see a child not educated properly. He also mentioned trust. Trust has been mentioned by, as well as Dr. Shue. The trust, I think, part of it comes from last year when they wanted to pave the parking lot at Terrell Lane for $1 million, and it came in a whole lot cheaper than that. I think that's why they want to see a lot of these numbers. I also agree with Mr. Piper about we are inundated with paperwork. I don't think there's a human being in this county that in the time that we're sitting here can read and comprehend this right here. This has got to be studied if you were going to really dive deep into this. So I don't know where we need to go from here, but I have to agree with Mr. Foy. I don't think we're making any progress.
And I have sat here for 34 years during these budget negotiations. And I got to agree with Mr. Piper when he said, when it comes down to it, we're just going to have to do what we can do. What we can afford is just like we always have for 34 years. We've always made it work, and we're going to make it work this year. It seems a little bit bumpier this year, but we're going to get there. Which is all I can ask our board, your board, work together all you can, being as open, transparent as you can, and we'll run with it. We'll have to. The only way we can. We're not going to stop. We can't. We're tasked with this job. And it will be done. For better or worse. Anyway, like I said, Mr. Piper, believe it, we're going to make it work. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, make some suggestions. It seems like we come to this every year. Part of that is, or a lot of that is due to what's going on in our legislature. I would suggest that we encourage our representation from North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, as well as our legislators and possibly this lobbyist that we're paying to put the pressure on the legislature to release the Leandro funds. The actions of the legislature are choking us out here. The responsibility is being put on the counties, and it's hurting the rural counties the most. And being that we are rural and the fastest growing, it's really hurting us. It's really hurting us.
Any other commissioner? Ms. Denton?
I just would like to say, just to clarify for the record, the county asked in its questions that we sent along in our normal process, we asked 12 questions. We received complete answers to 2 of those questions, and we received incomplete answers to 10 questions. And so tonight, we've received some additional information. I'll leave it up to the board as to whether or not you would like for us to continue to work together to get the remainder of this information. We are entitled to it, as the county attorney has advised us. We're entitled to this information. I think there are a couple of important points to make here. One of the important points is what Commissioner Bunn touched on, that the Terrell Lane parking lot was a discussion. The county set aside $1 million to fund that project, and it ended up being $364,780. And so those additional funds, we've set them aside. We've removed them since the project is over. And then we have continued to have some questions about enrollment, about the ADM, and some of those things. So again, I said at the beginning, this is about working together. Sure. This is about recognizing that we are, as much as anything, as has already been said by several folks here, as much as anything, what's going on at the legislature is affecting us and directing what we're having to do to gather information and make an appropriate decision. So I'll leave that to the board, but just wanted to make sure we understand clearly what the options are.
Okay. I recognize you. Yes, sir, to answer that question.
Well, thank you, sir. And I'd like to speak to capital outlay in general. When I arrived here, after replacing Mr. Piper, trying to fulfill those big shoes, Franklin County Schools received, I believe, its largest capital outlay budget at $1.2 million. That was 2016. We have used that money with, we've been good stewards of those funds, and we've worked through that. And we were, prior to COVID, making progress with close to $2 million allocated from this organization to Franklin County Schools for the facilities. Therefore, we've been able to avoid some of the problems that our neighbors have had. We've moved the equipment, we've moved the buildings, we've moved the facilities forward. When the year following COVID, we reduced the capital outlay budget to $1 million. Because things were tight, things were changed, we still had the needs, but we took a hit voluntarily. The next year when we discussed it, we came back with okay, we were good stewards of that $1 million, but we need more. And we were instructed to reduce that amount to $1.5 million by the county. So we did. We find ourselves last year still having those needs, still having the things that needed to be done, and we requested $3 million. And we learned at the county manager's presentation of the budget, not only that 1.5 was allocated, but on your website, $1.5 million was allocated for the next 5 years in the future, regardless of what we presented, regardless of what we turned in. This year, we have exact quotes. I will tell you that an exact quote in January or February will not look the same as July 1 when our fiscal year starts. But we've gotten them. and we'll work from them. But $2.6 million from our original almost $11 million request from principals, meat and potatoes request from principals. What can wait is triage. Your answer to your question, how do we prioritize with the funds we have, the limited funds we have sometimes, it is triage. What demands the most attention the soonest? That's how we make some of those decisions. That process, each principal has an opportunity to request and advocate for their school. We collect those, we put a committee together, we bring that committee together, we prioritize, we shoot for what we think is the bare minimum we can do. Then we go to our school board, a body politic elected to oversee what we do. They review each and every project, just like the 7 or 8 meetings we had where they reviewed every project for the next 10 years. They asked the questions. They audited. They thought in terms of what is the right thing to do for Franklin County schools and Franklin County to make sure that our facilities are prepared for the next generation. We get, as I said to you, I have exact quotes for this year. They are planning quotes only. Most likely, when we get to the point of it's time to do the project, we will get exact current 30-day quotes. They may be more, they may be less. Referencing the Terrell Lane project, when we visited and had that discussion with the county manager some 3 years ago, it was explained then, the initial planning quote from one vendor with the Terrell Lane could be as much as $1 million. And that was for a full-on, complete demo, grinding down, building up the foundation, and completely redoing the parking lot. As we shared with you in our meeting at Terrell Lane where we hosted you, hopefully you enjoyed our being hosted there, we would open that up to bid, as we are required to with that much money. One vendor was a lot closer to $1 million. One was the low bid that we actually went with. And it was the scope of the project was reduced as a result of timely legwork, bringing professionals in. I had a conversation with Mr. Pierce. He had an opinion, and I didn't disagree with that opinion, but what I shared with him is we're going to get the experts and find out, because we don't want to spend $1 million if we don't have to spend $1 million. We had tests done that indicated a smaller scope. That was what was bid. That was what happened. And we were completely transparent about that process. As you are contemplating the fate of the budget, as you're asking for more information, you see this once a year. We see it every day. We respond to it every day. Projects that come in unexpected, new roofs that we don't expect, but all of a sudden they cannot be repaired anymore. I've said in closed session or in meetings with the commissioners and some commissioners and the county manager, if you give our department a nickel, we're going to squeeze it for everything we can out of it. Our budget, our priorities are, I wrote it down, safety, educational excellence, and financial prudence. And those were our watchwords. So as you ask those questions, those are the answers we provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I really think it's a shame that we saved $600 million and got put under the microscope for it. But anyway, 600,000, excuse me. See, you didn't know how much we were asking for. On some of the questions that I think Manager Denton is alluding to that were not answered, some of them didn't make sense. I don't know how a school board can provide examples of how insufficient capital outlay funding in the past has impacted educational quality or compliance with state standards. Well, we we have to comply with a lot of folks, the state, the feds, and DPI. And we are put under the microscope on all of these projects. And I just don't see where that could be answered. And has the school board considered alternative solutions to address its capital outlay need? Well, I'm up for suggestions. You want us to do fundraisers? I mean, you know, where are you going to get alternate sources of money on that? And the one other comment I want to make before this ends tonight is, and we're talking about transparency in websites. Your website states under the education portion that there's 7,000, well, you say 7,799, but it's actually 7,899 students. The taxpayers pay for students in the public schools, and they pay for students in the charter schools. That number needs to be changed to 10,799, because that's who the taxpayers are paying for. And they need to know, you know, if these 10,000 students are the ones that are causing their taxes to go up, they need to know the right number. It's not just around 8,000, and projected for next year will be 11,114 students. And the taxpayers are paying for all of those students.
Okay. I recognize one more person.
Okay,
then
and
come
I'll
back
be
to the
quick.
question.
I too have looked at those questions, and I'm wondering if the answer to those questions will punish the students of next year. If we were not prudent, if we didn't do something, are the kids next year going to be punished because something didn't happen 2-3 years ago? I'm just asking that question.
All right, thank you. All right, any other commissioner have any comment? Ms. Bradley, Ms. London, Mr. Bunn, Mr. Speed? Mr. Preble, I think that's enough on your presentation. We have no more. I'm going to entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, there's been a motion made. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Say aye. All opposed? Motion carried. We stand adjourned.